Thank you very much, Balvinder, again, for being here. So for those of you that don't know, Balvinder is a lot of things, an entrepreneur, a business man, and a professor at IE University. The funny thing is that we didn't meet at IE University. We met at an IE alumni event back home in Mumbai, home for me. And I really resonated, Balvinder, with the concepts that you spoke about in the event. It was a masterclass surrounding leadership and authenticity and communication. And yeah, and then I reached out to you before I started the personal branding project, and you gave me some great advice. So thank you very much for being here. It's an honor.
Pleasure, Yuvraj, and really nice to connect with you. Also, your nature is so nice. How could I not support you and continue the communication? So I think you talk about personal branding, but you live that authentically in the way that you show up and the way you communicate with others. So that's something very important. And it's something important for me because in life you choose the people you're with.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So before we get into some of the topics that I have planned for this podcast, could you give us a background of your story and how and why you got into mental health and well-being?
Sure. So I was born in London. My parents are from North India. So my dad emigrated in the 50s to study in the UK for Punjab. And then he remarried his second wife, my mother, in the late 60s, and they came to UK. So coming to the UK also was a bit of maybe a shock for either parent, but also we lived a very different thing. We're three sons and we lived partly in Indian lifestyle because of my mother, and partly in English lifestyle because my father became very Anglophile, and also in a moment of tension in the UK of mass immigration. So, to be honest, that was a starting point for me to examine things about identity, but also examine things about mental health because there was a lot of pressure about how to manage this mix of culture, identity, external factors, and internal factors. Now, I've always been obsessed with psychology because I am an identical twin, and that's something that's marked me during all my life. But when I studied and I had a chance to go to university, people actually told me not to do psychology. So I was actually signed up for the first behavioral science undergrad, probably in Europe or the world, in the early 90s in North England. But the family and other people told me, what will you do with that? Maybe just become a professor. Well, I'm a professor now, which I'm happy with partly. But I took a more practical route, which I don't regret now. But at the time, I wasn't completely committed. So I studied business and finance at De Montfort University. What I liked about it, it was very general because I'm somebody who's interested in many different things. And when I finished the undergrad, to be honest, I wasn't very happy in the UK. And by chance or not by chance, because sometimes I think things are not by chance, I actually met a Spanish lady after my undergrad who became my girlfriend, and I moved to Spain. Now that changed things for me a lot because I wasn't very happy in the UK. I wasn't so happy with the family dynamic either. I wasn't very aware at that time, but then coming to Spain, a whole new life started for me. I loved the lifestyle. People were much more emotional and open. People were very affectionate. You have good sun. It was good for good well-being. I could live well without earning too much money. I'm talking about the 90s. And then things started. Now, in England, if I'd stayed in England, there would have been a path. My father was a director of British Airways. He wanted me to go on the graduate program. England is a very individualistic society, so it's very much about order, structure, logic. So I would have had a maybe determined career path. Spain is communitarian, it's all about relationship. And it was a company coming out of a country coming out of dictatorship. So the economy was not strong. The dictatorship stopped in 1977. So I didn't know what to do. So my first job was as an English teacher. I wasn't that happy with it, but it gave me a lot of access to different people. And then I suddenly started to become creative. So I realized I had to become a variable cost and I had to find a way to progress. So suddenly I started setting up companies. I've set up around 15 in total, a few have been successful. I started to talk to people. I got jobs very organically because I connect well with people. Sometimes they didn't care if I knew the topic, but they liked my personality. I even became an aid worker in conflict zones. I became a TV presenter. And then moving on, I developed into what I do now, which I like. Half of it is in communication and teaching at top universities around the world, which I never imagined because I was the most academic student. And then also business projects. So the business projects I do are not led so much about making money, which is important, but they're more about learning and interest. Because as a good friend to me said recently, life is about three things: love, learning, and joy. So most of those things give me that type of joy. Now, because of recent events in my family, which we can go into detail a little bit later, I've always been interested in psychology in people, probably because I'm identical twin, which is a very unique relationship, very symbiotic one. Started talking more openly about mental health, partly because of a situation I'm dealing with in my life, and partly because as I interact with so many people, I see that one of the biggest issues we face today is mental health, especially in developed countries. Because when you don't have enough food, your focus is feeding yourself and your stomach. Once you have enough food, your problem can become mental. And I see this, if you look at the data, that levels of anxiety and depression are through the roof in developed economies. So, what I've done now with my work and my teaching, partly there's some projects around mental health, but even if I'm teaching leadership, I talk about the importance of resilience and creating positive environments to create more effective working spaces. So sometimes I talk about it in the function of leadership because I think it's very important about creating the right culture for performance as well. And sometimes I talk about it directly when we talk about therapy, knowing oneself, loving oneself, feeling resilient to manage the challenges of life. So that's really where it's come from. And if I could, I'd spend all my time talking about mental health or well-being and resilience. And I do sow it into a lot of things I do. And there's a very positive response because there's a need, partly because a lot of these topics have stigma. And when I think about even Latin countries, I live in Spain. When I think about India, we don't talk about these topics enough, but they affect us. So when I talk about them, there's sometimes a very big impact because you open a door by being vulnerable so other people can talk about it too. So that's a bit of it in a little bit of a nutshell, you know?
No, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I agree. I think it is. It definitely is a stigma in countries like India, where I feel like everything looks good on the surface level, but deep down things are unresolved. It's like people put a carpet or a mat, on the problems so that it looks good on the outside, but they really don't get in to solve the deeper issues. Um, on that, how would you define well-being? Because I think well-being means different things to different people, but what would your definition of that be?
It's a very big word, but
Hmm.
probably I'd say, well, and I'm thinking about it now, well-being would be the capacity to be able to look after yourself, to be able to achieve one's goals. Because when you don't have well-being, you cannot live the life that you want to. So the capacity to live the life you want and at least to cover your needs. I think that's the base of well-being. But again, there's many, many factors to it because well-being is physical, mental, spiritual, psychological. So I'd say the capacity for a person to be able to cover their needs and then further on to live the life that they would like to have. I think that's the basic present tenant, and there are many pillars to that.
See. And if somebody if somebody wants to start, uh, let's say they want to feel better, they want to improve their mental health, where should they begin?
Now, first of all, I mean, humans tend to look at things when things go bad.
Hmm.
So when something bad happens, you examine things. But I think it's a simple question of you have to look into the mirror. So if you want to question things, if you are not feeling well, to first think what is going on with your life. So that can be provoked by a problem, or it could be a constant work of self-analysis, even through things like meditation. So first you have to ask yourself periodically the question, where am I? How am I? Am I feeling healthy? Am I able to live the life I want? And this changes over time. So I think you have to ask your question because I think the two basic tenets of this of well-being are knowing oneself, loving oneself, and then the third is being able to have self-care. And that's also connected with others because many philosophers talk about well-being being first you, how you connect with others, your social animals, and also your connection to the environment and nature. So I think those are the basic tenets. And I think when we talk about India, it's very difficult because there's a lot of obligation. So there's another aspect to this. If you're not allowed to live the life you want to live, it creates stress and trauma. And in all my research, we find that the childhood between 3 to 5 years old is very determinant. For example, if your parents let you be who you are and follow your interests, or they oblige you to do things that they want you to do that don't coincide with your own needs or interests. So that in that sense, Indian society is pretty difficult because we're tied to obligation, which has a good part, but it's not a good thing if you are more on your obligation to others than your obligation to yourself. Yes?
Hmm. And the way to get out of that you would recommend is to, you know, do practices such as meditation or go within and analyze as to what you actually want and then carve your way out of that.
Exactly. That's the
Uh,
first step. And then
mhm,
you will find ways to move forward and think about what are the things I need to improve? What are things I need to change? Now, if it's something that's a big question for you, you're going to do something about it. If it isn't very uncomfortable, probably you're not going to do things about it. So it
mhm,
depends on your self-confidence to make changes and also how uncomfortable you're feeling. Yes?
mhm. True. If I look back in my life itself, I think there were periods where I was, for lack of a better word, fed up with myself. Like the situation was really uncomfortable. I didn't like what I was doing, where I was at, and I think that caused immense change for me. It was like a trigger for immense change, where I took it to the extreme, but I think it was very rewarding in that sense because once you take it to an extreme, you know how far you can go, and then you can balance things out after that. So that was a little bit of my journey to it. But I wanted to hear about your journey with mental health. So I've read a little bit about your story, but if you could, if you're comfortable with it, of course,
Sure.
could you share your mental health struggles and things like that?
Of course. Now, I would say, I mean, from childhood, as I said, there are many aspects to health. They're physical, they're mental, there are many things. So, I mean, I come from a family that did look after my needs, but they didn't really look after my mental needs. And I don't blame anyone for that. My father was an immigrant working hard in the UK, even though he came from an affluent Indian family. My mother, his second wife, actually came from a more humble family. And I think it was very hard for her to suddenly come from India be in a new situation in England and suddenly have three kids in 1 year. That was
Wow.
very, very tough. So I think my dad was very, occupied with the financial aspect, and my mum was dealing with the day to day. So that caused a problem in the sense, if I look at it now, I didn't have maybe the attention I wanted from my parents, but I was lucky in the sense that I had my identical twin. Now, being an identical twin is a very unique circumstance where it's the strongest biological connection between two beings. Your one life split into two. So we were like a bunk, a bit suffocating in our teenage, but what was the good thing? I always had a playmate and a companion, even though outside could have felt a little bit hostile regarding emotion or the environment. So I always had him. So that's where the thing about psychology became very important because you're in a relationship which is very unique and is different to others. And so it makes you almost have things like telepathy, a very deep connection. You start to think, even though we're identical twins, we're different. And you think, how does that come about? And unfortunately, I left home early to go to university when I was 19. He didn't, and he suffered a lot. So everything came to a head 6 years ago when he actually took his life. So that moment was very traumatic for the whole family and also extremely traumatic for me because we'd been working to move these things around to try and help him. But the problem when you're an adult, you can decide to not ask for help. And he didn't want help for a long time, only until the end, which was too late. And then the other problem from maybe a good idea was he was always looked after. So when he was younger, instead of encouraging him to be more independent, he always had the basics covered. So that made him uncomfortable in a bad way. So on one side, the Indian idea of duty is a good thing, but in this case, it might have not been a very good thing because it didn't give him the motivation to find his own place, to find his own worth. And for the opposite for me, I left home at 18, 19. I didn't really go back. And then in my early 20s, I'm in a new country. I didn't ask for any help and I had to make it happen. Now, it wasn't easy, but then necessity is the mother of invention. And I was able to build a good life. I have my children, I have my family, I have my career. And he did none of that. So even though we're identical twins, we had very extremes of how we lived, even with the same genes and the same start. So from that point 6 years ago, which was a bit of a make or break for me, I decided that I want to fight because this was something that would consume me as well. But I couldn't let it happen because of for me and for my family and my children, two children. So what happened there, I did take the classic route of going to psychologists. They did help me to a certain point, but they didn't go deep enough. So what I looked at, and with friends' help, I wanted to find something that would help me to go deeper, to connect with my twin in his afterlife, but also to work on this pain that is so big and it's continuous, although I manage it better over time. Okay. So I discovered a whole new world of what they call alternative therapies, which are actually very traditional therapies. For example, we talk about, I'm not against pharmaceuticals or synthetic things. They treat the symptom, but they don't go to the cause. Look at Ayurveda. Ayurveda, Indian, talks about body in balance. If your body is in balance, it's less likely to become unhealthy. So these ancient practices, for example, use of psychedelics, which I discovered and I was very well guided by good people, helped me to go much deeper into understanding myself. And what was a revelation, I could connect with my brother with on an energetic level.
Hmm.
So this for me was both therapy and also learning. And I've actually facilitated retreats with people and family. And I've actually talked about these things in public, which are a little bit taboo because of the legal status, which is something imposed by governments or the powers that be. But these are traditional methods that have been used for thousands of years. And like anything, if they're well administered, they can provide a solution for you. I wouldn't say that everybody has to do it, but what I believe in, everybody should find what helps them in a safe way.
Hmm.
So, what helped me in this process, which is an ongoing one of learning, and in a spiritual way, I could say it's maybe a gift from my twin, Satinder, because I would never gone this path without him. I could connect with him on an energetic level and understand myself deeply with the use of psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, which gives you an elevated state of consciousness or self-understanding. Also, I had a lot of willingness to move forward because this is something that could break me or kill me. So I had a lot of support from my family and wife to give me a lot of freedom. And then also to be a part of community because we're social animals. I'm actually in a group of twins who lost their twins. And that was very important for me for mental health because I could share my story with people who could understand. So
Hmm.
when my brother passed, obviously people came around and helped us, to my mother, to my older brother, but they didn't really know what to do with me because very few people are identical twin. You know, it's one in X hundred number of births, and actually it's actually less common in Asian population.
Hmm.
So those three things help me to manage this better, and it's a constant work, but it opened up a new world for me, which I incorporate in my life and also in the things that I communicate with others. Yes,
Hmm.
obviously thinking about the forums and the context. But every time I talk about these things, there's a lot of interest. Either people have used these methods, either people want to use these methods, or there's also a growing interest in going to deeper levels of consciousness and understanding oneself and self work. I mean, if you think if the world outside is hostile, maybe a good thing is to go into oneself. And I
Hmm.
think that's a trend at the moment. I wouldn't say that the world is necessarily worse than 100 years ago. It's different. You know, 100 years ago, millions of people would die of a common cold. Today, psychology, anxiety, geopolitics, information overload is affecting all of us. And that has a very direct effect on mental health. But it's again how you use things. Like social media could be great to talk about, for example, our topic of mental health,
Hmm.
but social media imbalance can cause the opposite, where people isolate themselves and they don't connect with others in an authentic way.
Yes,
Because there's nothing like being with others.
true. Well, I think that was a yeah, like you said, it was a make and break situation, and I think you did the best you could to make something positive out of that, which is very inspiring. Um, about connecting with people authentically, I believe that requires a a sense of vulnerability.
Yes.
How would you recommend uh, people to develop or cultivate that vulnerability? Because I'll be honest, it's also difficult for me. I don't like to talk a lot about my emotions, though I'm getting there slowly. But why do you think there's a stigma around it, and how can someone become more comfortable with being vulnerable?
I mean, all of us are unique. And I think when people talk about vulnerability, they talk about it as if it's a weakness. But actually, it's the opposite. So if I connect it to my story, we're Sikhs, and I respect the Sikh tradition so much. It's all about service. So when in my shoes, when I talk about these matters, it's to serve. It's not about Paul Bal and his problem.
Hmm.
I think of it, I can open a door and I can help people to talk about authentic things and maybe even change your life. So the way I see it is a question of service, it's a question of love. If my story can help people to open up their stories, then it can only be a good thing. But I use it in that regard. I don't use it in the idea of ego and it's all about me. I use it as something that can serve as a platform. So I think if we all accept that we are unique in the world, we should share our story because that can help others to share theirs, and then we can understand each other better. I think that's the way we can look at it. And that's definitely the way I look at it after years of self analysis and self doubt. Because deeply, I'm a very timid person. But why do I speak in public? Because I think that I can learn and I can help others to advance. And for then, this it's not about one's ego.
Hmm.
And then you can have amazing conversations. And you can come to realization for yourself and others. It's like when you're feeling bad, maybe meditation is good, but not all day to be stuck in your room. Go outside and connect and get new perspectives. So, getting new perspectives can help you to look at your story in a different way or realize new things. So, every time I've had a heartfelt conversation where you've been very honest, you've been very open, the reactions have been incredibly powerful and sometimes, almost life changing for others. So it's only a bonus. But yes, you need a bit of courage and self-confidence to do it. But you have to think that it's an act not just for you. But that's how I see it. Everybody has to find their own reason to want to do that. And there's no obligation to do it. Yeah.
Hmm. No, I agree. I think it's uh it's doing a service when you use your story as a platform to catalyze change. So once you can inspire people to uplift themselves and inspire positive change, then I don't think it's selfish anymore because it's causing change in others and it's less about you. Um,
Right.
Wonderful. You also, I think this is related to this. You also come across as very compassionate and very understanding. So how do you go about that? Is there a particular, a set of things that you did to develop compassion for people, for beings, for the environment, and how can someone develop that?
Yeah, so remember, everyone has a unique story and you have to cultivate your unique story. So, as I said, what's marked me so much is that I'm identical twin. I was not born alone. Where one life split into two. So somehow I look for the twin in others. So I was never alone. I always had a companion, and now I have him on an energetic level. So
Hmm.
I think this was the first thing of being a twin and realizing I'm not alone, and that somehow the twin is in everybody. So that duality, I think, marked me very clearly. And then I just wanted to understand. And I realized if you're good to yourself, you can be good to others. And being good has so many advantages for yourself and everyone else. So I think that sowed the seed, but also a need to understand. Now, other things that affected me deeply were we lived a good material life in England and India. In India, we had it before, and my parents worked very hard in the UK. Yes. But as a kid, from the age of 2 or 3, I'd go to India every year. And although we had a nice house and everything, on the way, you would see many different things because in the early days, to not wait for the train from Delhi to Jalandhar, we would take a taxi. So it was fun because our dad would hire an ambassador taxi, which is like a primitive SUV, very big round vehicle, and we'd have a 7, 8 hour journey by car, stopping on the way. Now, those trips are eye-opening for me because I would say, how come I have a house and food and we're stopping and there's loads of families living on the street? So I suddenly thought the world is not just how I see it, there are many different factors. And India, especially in the 100 countries I visited, is pretty extreme regarding contrast. So that opened my eyes a lot, and also the relative nature of things. I always remember as a kid, because I was always very inquisitive, you have to follow your spirit. I'm a very inquisitive person, I'm a very social person, I like people. I remember, I think I was 6 or 7, and I asked a family who was sleeping on the road, I asked them, "How are you?" And they said, "We are fine." And I said, "How can you be fine if you sleep on the road?" And they said, "Well, we're lucky." I said, "How come you're lucky?" I said, "We sleep in the same spot every day, but that family over there, they have to look at for a new spot every night." So I was just bewildered by that, at the way people look at their own situation in a relative way. So it made me open up my horizon. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a way of seeing things, even in very tough environments. So it made me even more empathetic to consider, how do other people live and how do they see their circumstance, even though it can be very extreme physically. Yes.
Mm. Yeah, I think India is a place where you get to see so many things and it really opens your eyes up because every time, I mean, I've been studying abroad for the last 10 odd years, and I've come back to India after a long time. I mean, I always came back during vacations, but I'm here for a bit, and I feel like it teaches you so much about life. The people that you see, the polarities, the gaps, and I like to refer to it as a training ground for spirituality because I feel like when you're in a very comfortable environment and everything is in order, it's very easy to talk about spiritual concepts and even to practice it, but it's very difficult to practice these spiritual concepts of being present, of being compassionate when you're in a place where there's a lot of chaos all the time. Um, and when you're in a place where you're always being tested. But yeah, I
And
wanted
I would
to.
say you're right.
uh,
There's a decision we make because a lot of people ask me about going to India, and I say, you choose. You want to live in a bubble, everything will be perfect, or do you want to really live it and you start walking in the street and encountering things? Then you have to control your judgment because it's going to test you. So you decide, you want to live in the bubble, do what you like, or you want to be tested. Now, if you want to be tested, it might not be easy, but you come to a lot of realization about who you are, how you live, and how others live. And that's the beauty of India. It has everything all at once.
True. Um, I compare it to when so I did my boarding school in Switzerland and then I moved to Spain for my bachelor's and master's, and my life was beautiful. Everything was in order, and you know I put myself into self-development and I really liked it and I started doing hard things so that I could challenge myself. But even in all of that, everything was always in order and everything was going smoothly and perfectly. And I developed this kind of self-confidence and this resilience and this mental toughness. But when I'm in India, it's very different because I come with that thing that okay, I can do hard things and I can take on challenges. But in India, everything just comes at you from different angles. So you realize the points that you need to work on and that it kind of diminishes your pride and things like that for the better. It's like it reminds me of the quote that a bad day for your ego is a good day for your soul. Um, so I think in India it just trains you on and on again and again. But yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about alternative treatments. We talk about the dissolution of the ego, but we have to remember we all need ego. Ego is a power for you to move forward and even to protect yourself, but we cannot let the ego dominate what we do and our decision making. So that's why India is so unique. And when I go often, I'm excited, and there's a moment I'm frustrated, and it's everything at once. I think India, you need your safe space because out there it's crazy.
Indeed. Indeed. I'd like to touch a little bit upon influence.
Yes.
So we spoke about cultivating compassion and being authentic, but how do you use those traits and any other traits to actually influence people for the better in a personal setting or in a business setting?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, for the better is something quite subjective sometimes. So, as I said, like when I talk about mental health, I talk about service to try to help people to understand themselves better. When I talk about business, a lot of it time is in the context. So, when I teach about leadership, I see the leader's role as the person who creates the atmosphere so that people can create value, okay? And hopefully in a positive, ethical way. But not everybody sees it like that. So for me, why I talk about influence and communication skills is that it gives you the power to connect and give your message that might serve others, but it also gives you the power to move people towards a goal. So especially when we talk about change management. Now, the way we communicate something can change everything. You can have a very nice product, but if you don't communicate it well personally or through marketing comms, it's not going to work. You might be the best communicator in the world, but your product is not good. It's probably not going to work either. But the way we talk to others can influence them, especially if we know something about their personality. Are they more logical? Are they more emotional? And these can help us in life towards reaching our own goals. It can help groups to work towards a goal, or it can even help others to open. So it's a very, very fine art. So it's something definitely to learn. I mean, as I said, I'm deeply a very timid person. When I was a teenager, the worst thing you could ask me to speak in public. A professor forced me to do it. I'm so grateful for that professor because now I have a chance around traveling around the world, meeting people because I have some skills in this and I can help them to have the skills and learn from them too. So it's a very powerful skill, especially when we talk about today where the machines do so much and the AI does so much.
Hmm.
But things like empathy is a very human skill. It's a very nuanced skill. Let's see what happens in 10 years about empathy, but it's something that we need to cultivate because the machines are going to do so much of the other. So that's the basic tenet about this. And the way we communicate according to the people in front of us is key. You know, I could say to you that's bad, you might get defensive. I could say to you, how could you do it differently? And you give me a response.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there's an art to this that can help us with our own goals, other people's goals, and creating value.
Hmm. I also feel like when you do it that way, you also don't come across as pushy, um, as you're trying to, as if you're trying to enforce something on somebody.
Exactly. It depends on the context. I mean,
Hmm.
imagine if you have factory workers, maybe you don't want to inspire them, they have to follow a process, you have to give orders. But maybe if we're developing a new tech project,
Hmm.
I need to inspire people to come up with the good ideas. So in life, we are many things. We are workers, we are brothers and sisters, we are husbands, we're fathers, we're
Hmm.
many things. So each situation, as long as you don't lose your core value, it needs a different approach. Yes.
Hmm. Indeed.
And the ones who know this well, they're more likely to achieve their goals or common goals.
Indeed. Um, I wanted to touch a little bit upon creativity. You mentioned that you're naturally a creative person, but have you in whatever in all the practices that you've done and what you've been through so far, have you had any experiences that uh, come from beyond the realm of the intellect? So from intuition or from like I for example, I've had this sometimes where I just get these flashes and I know exactly what I need to do. It's very direct, precise, and concise, and it just feels right. And I don't have to put that thought into my logic, onto my intellect. I don't have to overanalyze it. I just know that it's correct. And a lot of my creative output also comes from this. So have you had any similar experiences?
Yes. I mean, maybe because, I mean, my identical twin was a musician. I've always been interested in art and music, which has inspired me, but I've gone until recently more on the business route. But even in the business, there decision making that sometimes you know it. So
Hmm.
what I've been working on the last few years is things like instinct, energy. So more and more, I base my decision making on instinct rather than just on pure data.
Hmm.
So that makes me be more creative or look at things differently in the way I do things. The way I've done it more intuitively has been directly with art. So I have painted, and when I've painted, I've just been, I haven't thought, I've just like seen myself as a channel. And even when I made some music, it was just, I started to connect as a channel. And what came out was very intuitive because I didn't let it pass through the filter of the mind. And that's also something I learned very greatly with the use of psychedelics is going to this subconscious and trying to not let it pass through the filter of the mind too much, but just you're letting it flow in a very cathartic way. Yeah.
Can anyone get into that state without the use of psychedelics to
Of course.
to channel the
Yes, of course.
creativity? But I
I
think,
think yes,
hmm.
because then you have to be very in tune with oneself. What psychedelics do is like a multiplier.
Hmm.
You know, it's super fast to go deep into these things and to feel very inspired, to feel very energetic, very connected. But of course, I mean, everybody has things that inspire them. It could be music, it could be looking at nature, it could be doing sport. So I think it's understanding oneself in that regard. But definitely, yes, but they have to want to do it.
Mm.
Yes. There has to be a need or something that pushes them. When you talk to artists, they say that they haven't decided to be artists, they're just a channel. Yes. And
Yes.
then they'll make the sacrifice because that's more important to them than anything else.
Mm. I'd like to ask you a little bit about what habits you practice on the daily to show up more authentically, to be your creative self. Any special
Yes.
habits?
Yeah. So I do meditate and I
Okay.
do a lot of it through walking and being very conscious.
Okay.
I do listen to a lot of music of many different styles, which takes me on a massive journey. Um, I do try to get up early and have time for myself to reflect before the day affects me too much. And a lot of time before I do something important for me, which is relative, I will take time to clear my mind to give me a fresh perspective. So I do take a lot of times to pause in the day to reflect on what's important or what I have to achieve from what I'm trying to do. And it becomes like a muscle. So I remember before when I'd give a big talk to maybe 1,000 people, I'd prepare for weeks. Now, apart from the product I have to show or the content, I can prepare myself in 10 minutes because I'm practiced with it. Yeah. So I take a lot of time to reflect on things and to think and to visualize what would I want from this? What is the result I would like, or what is the learning from it? What helped me to do that a lot was being a professional mediator. So when you deal with people in conflict, normally someone's written a report, but this report has a lot of bias. You have the good and the bad person. I never take that on board because then it won't help me to find the real cause of the conflict. So we do an exercise where you actually you blank your mind. We call it tabula rasa. You clean your mind. You make it very, very open. You make it very non-judgmental and very serene. So you can enter this process in a way not colored by anything else. So this type of practice is very important. So for me, walking, meditation, uh, doing retreats occasionally that are very deep dive, art and music help me a lot, and a lot of time of self-reflection. Yes, even in little things during the day.
Mhm. And do you think you mentioned that, you've practiced the muscle so much that it's very easy for you to speak. You don't need to prepare as much as you used to prepare for you to speak at events and for you to teach. Um, do you do you develop scripts for preparation or anything of that sort? So if you could just run very briefly
Yes.
through your method, because I'm personally interested.
Yeah. So, obviously, when I have an important intervention, I'm going to prepare the content. I'm going to think about the audience. I'm going to prepare my mood
Okay.
because imagine if, in the type of work I do, it's planned well in advance.
Hmm.
Yes. So I met you in Mumbai, maybe I knew 3 months before I was going, but I don't know my mood that day. I could be in a very bad mood. So what helps me is having skills that I've learned so I can mechanically go through the motion and start.
Hmm.
But then what I want to do is connect to the moment so that then I'm really feeling it and I'm in the moment. So having the skills helps me to start at a high baseline, but then what I want to be really is in the moment. So now when I'm doing a conference on a topic I know, I'm thinking about the audience. I'm thinking about how I want to show up. So I'll prepare myself by breathing, listening to music, because I want to give it with my full heart and I want to give it with positivity. And then I start. If it's something new, obviously I'll prepare very well my content, my storytelling, a type of script in my mind, and then I'll go there and I'll do my best with something new, which is also a challenge for me. What I don't want is the audience to think that I've done it for the first time. I want it to flow very well. So
Hmm.
there's techniques that can help me, but also the people connection. So the way I show up, it's a lot about being in the right mindset because the technical stuff I have. It's like being a tennis player. If you've played for 5 years and have good technique, you can rely on your technique. But if you really want something magic, you have to be inspired.
Fascinating. I do recall when I entered the room that you were presenting in in the event. You were having very lighthearted conversations with everybody. I think it
Yeah.
was your way to set the mood for the people in the room and for yourself as well. So the entire environment was very lighthearted and relaxed, but yet everybody was focused and alert when you were presenting. So I think that's something that I observed and I think that that really worked.
Yeah. There's a simple thing there. It's like breaking the ice.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can see an audience as an enemy. So
Hmm.
you have to break the ice with the enemy. So what I do is, because I'm timid but social, I will greet everyone who enters the room.
Hmm.
And I will maybe start a conversation on a detail because I want to start to create the ambience. Yes, the ambience where we're open, we're relaxed, which will help us with the objectives of the meeting, but also to create an atmosphere where we feel connected. And so that shows you can make the atmosphere what you want if you have the skills and you have the courage to be out there and to be engaging with others.
Hmm.
Yes. So the atmosphere is a lot dependent on you, especially being the speaker.
Hmm.
And I know the type of atmosphere I want. I want it to be light-hearted but serious. I want it to be jovial. I want it to be connected. I want it to be warm. So I'm going to show all those skills myself. If I don't show them, I'm not going to be authentic. And I'm lucky I have that nature, but I'll amplify it a little bit.
Mm. Yeah, and I think in one sense, uh, you're influencing people to mirror the emotions that you have yourself and that you're emulating yourself.
Exactly. Because think about it, people come to an event, they don't know each other. They're going to be a bit nervous. they're going to be a bit awkward. You try to make it less problematic or easier for them.
Yeah.
And then you see how things change. So it's also, we could say, it's a type of technique.
Mm, I
But
see.
a simple thing in life, if you are demonstrating something that is the opposite of what you're showing, it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be convincing.
Mm.
If I'm teaching about influence and I can't influence, if I'm teaching about physics and know nothing, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I would like to end the conversation with a very simple phrase that you shared in one of the videos that you featured in. It was released by IE on YouTube, and you ended the video with and I'm quoting, "Life is energy, and energy is infinite." So what does this mean, and how did you come to this realization?
Yeah, so I was always a bit clued up on this because of telepathy, being identical twin. But in my research and in my work, especially with the shamans, especially in the nature, in the Amazon, I realized we are energy because I connected with my twin brother, with him being in heaven or whatever you call it. And it was a very real experience. So what I realized is we are energy, we don't die. Now, you can read that by the philosophers and the psychologists and the physicists, but until you live it, you're not going to believe it. Okay. So having that experience of touching somebody who's physically dead, what I knew that we are infinite. And when you study it, you realize it's the truth. What is our oldest known relative? Maybe it's a meteorite that's billions of years old. So we are just a continuation. We are just information. We're just DNA. We're a continuation of everything that came before us, and that will continue in some way towards the future. So that made the part of energy very tangible for me, and the fact that it's something that will never stop. And that gave me a lot of comfort. So
Mm.
we are shaped by everything that's gone before us, and we will shape everything that goes forward because we are energy which never dies and is infinite. And that is being tested in a physical way and even a philosophical way. So that's why I believe that so much, and it gives me a lot of peace.
Wonderful. Well, Balvinder, it was an absolute joy to have the conversation with you. I think I can sit with you for hours on end to talk about the topics that we speak about. But again, I really enjoyed it. A lot of valuable insights that I would love to bring to the world, and I would also love to keep our connection and for you to see how I progress as well.